get started here, so if everyone could just take their seats, that would be great. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is that all right? I never know how close to hold my face to this thing. Hi everyone, I'm Penny Billings. I chair the Community Center Study Committee, and thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate your attendance. I want to introduce the other members of our committee. We've all been working since we were hard this summer, every other week meeting since we were appointed in May. On the end is Doug Carson, who represents the Parks and Rec Department, Renell Fredrickson, who chairs the Board of Selectmen, Tim Higgins, who's our town administrator, Dan Ferreira, the director of the Parks and Recreation Department, Steve Gladstone, who's an at-large member like myself. This is David Pollock, who's our consultant with Abacus Architects and Planners. Nancy Marshall, who is also an at-large appointee, and you know, everyone knows Carolyn, who is your director here at the Council on Aging. I'm going to turn the way we're going to do this today is I'm going to ask Carolyn and Dan to give a brief slide presentation of the current conditions here at Bemis Hall for the Council on Aging and at the Hartwell Complex for the Parks and Recreation Department, so that you'll know what the current conditions are if you don't already. And then David Pollock is going to give you a brief presentation on the 5 sites that we're considering for either a new community center or for a revitalized Council on Aging facility. And then we're going to open it up to discussion with all of you. And if anyone has any questions, you can ask them of all of us formally, or you can ask of any of us informally after we finish. Dilla Tingley just came in. Dilla is the COA representative on our committee as well. We also, just if you haven't seen them, if you didn't come to the other public forum, there are some scale model little dioramas there on the table over by the windows. And those are the sites that are under consideration, so people can see what the current conditions are with buildings there and see what other possibilities might exist. And there are some posters on the walls as well that talk about the sites and what's here in Lincoln and also what other community centers have done. So, Carolyn and Dan, you want to take over?
Well, I think most of you are sort of aware of Bemis Hall and some of the difficulties, but so I'll kind of try to fly through my presentation, but hopefully I'll say some things that maybe you hadn't really considered before when you were using it. So why is Lincoln considering a community center? As you all know, the senior population of Lincoln is growing. In 1983, when the COA moved into Bemis Hall, there were 1,000 seniors, and that number is now almost double. There's about 1,900 now. And the reason for that is people are living longer and they are staying at home longer with disabilities. And what that means is that the COA needs to offer more programs, more services to meet the needs of the people who are staying at home, as well as the growing population of active seniors. It also means that we need a little different kind of building than we needed in 1983. We need one that can accommodate disabilities, that accommodates confidential services. And I'm going to stop right here just to, does anybody need a hearing assistance while we're talking? Okay. We have some hearing assistant devices, and I forgot to mention that we have those for you. But I mean, that's another example of a building that really works for the people who need it. I think all of you probably know what we do, but I just wanted to list all of the things that we do. Most of them are right here in Bemis Hall, but we do have some things outside because they cannot be accommodated in Bemis Hall. One aspect of what we do that a lot of people aren't aware of is social services to keep people safely and independently in their homes, which is a big part of our core mission. So that's, the social services, the confidential services, and these are available, many of them, to residents of all ages.
Thanks, everyone. Once again, I'm Dan Ferreira with the Parks and Recreation Department. We operate down at a school complex in the Hartwell Pods. The pods were built in the 50s as temporary classrooms, and when the prior building project was completed in 95-ish, the schools no longer needed them for classroom space, so they became available to the community. We moved down shortly thereafter and began programming in there. And we're very happy there. Currently, we operate in the pods. The Lincoln School District's maintenance office operates in the pods. The LEAP after-school program, I'm not sure the exact term, but leases a pod sort of annually. And the pods also provide programming spaces for both the Lincoln preschool and the K-8 school program, as well as Magic Garden and various community groups. So these are all organizations that operate either out of the Hartwell main or in the K-8 building, but the pods provide important overflow space for certain programs. We're real happy where we are in terms of a location because the campus is home to most of our activities. Those two red dots represent the red boxes of the A and the B pod. Those are where our offices and our kind of core programming spaces are. I apologize, it's not visible. These green highlighted areas are the athletic facilities that we oversee on campus. North of this photo is the pool and another baseball diamond and ball field. It's not easy to make out, but it is up there. And most importantly to us, these blue areas indicate locations where we have access. We are given great access to school facilities, whether they be the gyms, the auditorium, the library. The LEAP after-school program gives us summer access to their space for our summer camp, because obviously that requires more room than we would typically have. So we're very fortunate to have these great collaborations on campus. These are just some of our participation numbers. We try to offer something for everybody as our goal. Hopefully you all had an opportunity to take one of our programs. These are just examples of the programs that we offer. I just want to point out that we've sort of expanded the last 5-6 years. We're now running all of the town celebrations, so July 4th, the summer concerts, Memorial Day, Winter Carnival, in addition to our more standard programs and facilities. I'm going to turn it back to Karen.
Can I ask this one question?
Sure.
Pull up the picture where your pod is. Where is Lincoln Road there so I can...
So Lincoln Road would be kind of on this corner over here.
Okay, so that's it.
I
I just go there to vote. I'm not quite sure what this is.
Yeah, so
I'm
Lincoln Road
sorry.
would be here, actually. Ballfield Road would come in here. You go to vote there.
Okay, all right, thank
And
you.
so the pods will.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what are some of the specific difficulties with Bemis Hall? As you all know, we have 11 spaces in front. Most of you had to cross Bedford Road in order to get here. For some of you, that wasn't a problem, but for people who are on walkers, who may be a little slower for one reason or another, or if there's a car that's just very distracted and is going speeding down that hill, it can be dangerous. We have a wonderful new pedestrian lighting system, but that's not going to stop a really distracted driver. So it's safer, but it's certainly not completely safe. We have another problem of people who are parked in front having to pull out into traffic. You can see there's a 3-car accident about to happen here, and it didn't actually happen, but you can see that it easily could have. The distance that people have to walk if they park across the street or down the street to Bemis Hall, it's a challenge and a barrier to people who have mobility disabilities. So you can see, imagine if you were on a walker and that was your blue car and you had to walk all the way to Bemis Hall. Well, if you had difficulty walking 20 or 30 feet, you might not bother to make that walk, even though you need the services. Accessibility is an issue here at Bemis Hall, and there are many ways that Bemis Hall can be made completely accessible. We have a wonderful new front entrance that has made Bemis Hall much more accessible, but our ADA compliant door is still the side ramp door. And if for some reason you can't come in the front and you're in a wheelchair and you need to come in that door, you go up the ramp, you come into a hallway, you go through a fire door, you go through another hallway, and then you go through one of either 2 program rooms, both of which are frequently in use, so you've got to interrupt somebody, and then you're finally in the lobby. And if you had to do that to come to Bemis Hall, how anxious would you be to come to a program here? Our bathrooms, we have, as you all know, We have 2 bathrooms, only one of them is accessible. The women's room is not accessible. Women are certainly welcome to use the accessible bathroom, but not everybody is comfortable doing that. And you can see that if you're in a walker, it's very difficult. This is an actual person who, when she saw me taking pictures of the bathroom, said, "Let me show them how difficult it is to use the bathroom in a walker." If you happen to be in the accessible men's room and you fall, which has happened a number of times, what you have to do is you have to get yourself over to the door or a wall, press the button, and wait for the COA staff to rescue you all in full view of the lobby.
Not nice.
No. Confidentiality is a big issue, and many of our most important services are helping people with deeply personal problems. And so not knowing that your private information will remain private is a real obstacle to getting services. Because we have no other place for it, our reception area is in the lobby, and that means that if you come in and ask to speak with the social worker, or even if you make a phone call, anybody who's in the lobby can hear you. And a quick story, our receptionist was answering a phone call, and she did her best to be confidential, but it was somebody who was getting a ride to the hospital. And as soon as she hung up the phone, somebody in the MAC room said, "Why is Mrs. Smith going to the hospital?" So we do our best, but it's hard in our space. We have 2 staff offices. The social worker, Pam, of course, does most of our social services work. You can see her office is the one sort of in the back there. It opens onto a busy hallway. It also shares a partition wall with the living room, which means that if people are talking loudly in there, it can be heard by people in the hallway or in the living room. And if you want to talk to me privately, well, you can just forget it, because my 4th wall doesn't even go all the way up to the ceiling. The other place we do confidential counseling is the computer room, which is right off the lobby and is separated from the lobby by only a door with a glass window. So not only can people see you, but people can hear what you say as you're talking to people about your health benefits, about your taxes, or about your veterans benefits. We have this space, as you all know. We also have 2 program rooms downstairs. One is 400 square feet, which is about a quarter of this building. The other is 300 square feet, and it can get very crowded down there. We frequently have a situation where we have programs in all 3 rooms, so we don't have a lot of choice, but it can become very uncomfortable. We have a lack of social space, and we talk about social space. What we mean is a place for people to come together, to have a feeling of belonging. It's that same sense of belonging that younger people get from work or school. And just another quick story. I was talking to someone who goes to another senior center, to a Fix-It shop, which is a drop-in space. And he told me that going to the Fix-It shop actually saved his life, because he knew that he could always go there and always find people who understood how he felt about the fact that he had just lost his wife. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about social space. It's a place for people to really feel part of a community. And what we have for it is our kitchen table with 2 chairs. We also have 2 chairs in the lobby, which of course there's no confidentiality there, so you can forget talking about your personal problems to each other. Because we don't have enough rooms, we have to do many different activities in the same space. These are all activities that go on in our math room. You can see it's a wide variety of activities, and the room really isn't designed for many of them. For example, we hold fitness classes in there, and it does not have a fitness floor, which means it could be dangerous. People could injure themselves on it. The other problem is we frequently will have 2 or 3 programs in that room during a day, and I'm constantly making people leave one program before they're ready so that another program can come in.
So as I mentioned, we're very happy with our location in general. Our problems at the pods are nowhere near as acute as the problems here in Bemis Hall. The square footage is certainly reasonable for the programming we do and the communities that want to use this space. The problem is really they were not really intended to be used the way they're being used now. They were originally classrooms, so often the room is bigger than it needs to be for the program, and other groups can't get in because the whole space is taken up. Or in cases there are some small rooms, that top little image is just intended to be a layout of these pods, but they're all laid out fairly similarly. And they're buildings built in the 50s that were intended to be temporary, so we think there's certainly an opportunity for improvement, but there are upgrades in accessibility and asbestos remediation, building envelope, fixtures, finishes. Those are all the things that the town needs to decide if those buildings are worth a capital investment to bring them up. They're still operated by the public schools, and the public schools do keep them usable for groups and use them themselves, but they're obviously not their primary area of concern. If you've been paying any attention to the school building project, obviously they have bigger fish to fry, so these buildings are currently sort of operating at a minimum level, is the way we would see it. And so as much as they are an opportunity for us, and we're very appreciative, parking is a challenge. I think a lot of people look at the parking lots and assume, well, there's lots of space, and certainly compared to Bemis, it's an improvement, but there's a lot of use, as I've tried to indicate. So the parking can be tricky. If you tried to get to Town Hall when they were operating on a B-Pod for a while, you may have a sense of it. There are pinch points where it's very hard to find a spot. Cars are parked out on the ball fields themselves in fire lanes, and it can be a bit challenging.
So a number of us went and visited a number of community centers in the region, and we just wanted to give you a sense of what other towns offer. First is adequate and accessible parking. The buildings are fully accessible, and not only that, but they have universal design, which means they go beyond the ADA, which is mainly focused on people in wheelchairs. And so for people with walkers, for people with vision problems, there's natural lighting. For people with cognitive problems, there's a natural flow to the layout.
And there's just opportunities for diverse programming, spaces the town doesn't currently offer, so maybe a fitness room with actual equipment in it, computer labs that can handle more than a couple people, art spaces. Right now, every space we use needs to stay fairly universal, so because you can't really dedicate spaces because there's not really enough. Nothing is quite to the quality it could be if we had a few more options for space and we could start to dedicate rooms. And there's some efficiencies when you think about a community center and you think about combining departments and also the outside programmings. A lot of what the COA is looking for in terms of the type of space and the size is similar to what we would be looking for in our program. So it makes sense to consider the fact that there's two departments as well as community organizations that are looking for some similar spaces. Not all similar. There are certainly things that the COA would need that maybe the Park and Rec would not, but by and large there's a lot of opportunity for overlap. So the idea of improving in both areas in two different locations, when you compare it to the idea that you may efficiently build one thing that serves both, is something really to consider. And obviously any modern construction is going to trump construction from the 50s or whatever. What was Bemis?
1890.
There we go.
Okay, as I mentioned, confidentiality is an issue. So here's how Concord solves it. They have the reception area, and then they have all the staff offices in the back. So what people say to staff cannot be overheard. Again, spaces for socializing, a variety of spaces. You can see sort of living room, kitchen table. There's also, libraries, game rooms, and rooms that are the right size and designed to be flexible. So you can see there's, social spaces. There's places for people to talk together. Fitness classes, intergenerational language classes, computer room, presentation rooms, a nurse's office. A little gift shop in Concord that raises $8,000 a year.
Throughout this process, we don't want to focus solely on Council on Aging and Park and Recreation needs. Lincoln has a very rich sort of civic tapestry. There's a lot of organizations in town that use town space for either programming, for storage, and it makes perfect sense to be considering these groups in their needs as we think about how we are going to address the town's needs. We'll just go through this slide. This is just some statistics, the types of organizations that are using Bemis Hall and the pods currently. There's some attention there at the bottom. Those are photos of the basement of Bemis Hall. which is serving as storage for 5 or 6 different organizations at this point. I think we're good. Does anyone have questions?
But first,
Thanks, Carol.
Carolyn, could you just speak a little bit to when we toured the Council on Aging and rec facility in Bedford, what was the outcome of programming because of the work that was done there?
Well, as some of you may know,
Microphone.
I was actually in Bedford before we built a new space and after we built a new space. And I would say that the attendance almost doubled immediately because we had more people coming and we were able to offer more programs and people felt more comfortable. And that's, when we spoke to somebody from the state who oversees 350 Council on Aging, he said he has seen, generally it goes from double to 7 times the attendance almost immediately when a Council on Aging gets more appropriate space.
Carol, can I ask a question? When you visited these, were most of them community centers that they had both Council on Aging and like Parks and Recreation, so they had a dual purpose?
Yes, we only visited community centers. And most of them had designated space for Council on Aging, designated space for recreation and community groups, and then common space in the middle. So it wasn't like everybody was mashed together. It was, you know, the seniors had their own place, the kids had their own place, but then there was sharing, which is both economical and creates an opportunity for intergeneration.
Both those towns you mentioned are much bigger than Lincoln. Did you ever look at Carlisle? What do they have?
Carlisle is actually much smaller than Lincoln.
Right.
But they actually don't even have a senior center.
they go to Concord?
We went to Concord and
No,
there...
the Carlisle people.
Yeah, what happens when a town doesn't have resources is the seniors go to other towns. But we're basing our projections of what we need on a state standard that is per senior. So even though, for example, Bedford may have twice as many seniors, so we're looking at senior space that's half as much as Bedford. So it's not like we're trying to construct something that's exactly the same as a much bigger town. We're trying to construct appropriate space that is appropriately scaled down to Lincoln.
Okay.
So my name's David Pollock, and I'm your consultant. My firm's called Abacus Architects and Planners. And the town meeting...
Can you lift it this way?
You want me to talk louder?
No, just point the mic towards you.
Okay. The study committee was asked by town meeting to look at the feasibility of 5 sites in town. And they're all here. There are 2 in South Lincoln. Here, this is near the train stop, and this is the DPW, and then the school site, this is Ballfield Road, and then these are 2 sites in Lincoln Center, Bemis and Pierce House. So here they are again. On the left, lower left is Lincoln Center, in the middle, Ballfield Road, and then on the upper right, Lincoln Center. And I'll just briefly go through the 5 sites. So the first site is the commuter parking lot behind Donlands that the committee was asked to study. And it currently houses or serves 99 commuter parking spaces, and it's also a right-of-way for fire and police apparatus that loop through the mall and Lincoln Woods. The second site is the Department of Public Works site. The first site is about 1 acre. DPW is about 3.5 acres, and it's got the large DPW garage, which is here, and then the school bus company at night parks their school buses here, and then there's in back sand and salt, and they have a filling pump there and other uses. And it's understood that if a senior center were to be built at DPW, even though there might be additional land behind the building, DPW utilizes the whole site for sand and salt and trucks and everything else. So if a senior center were built there, DPW would have to be built somewhere else. And it's not known where it would be built, but it's possible that it could be built at the transfer station. Not here on the old landfill, because that's conservation land, but here is the transfer and the recycling and the swap house, and there is land there, but it would obviously cost additional money. Pierce House, which is just down here, you all know where it is a site that was identified. The white here is the roof of the summer tent. And then the house is directly behind that. The two green lines indicate setbacks from the ponds and the stream. So there's Pierce House, and there's the big pond, and there's the stream draining out of the pond. And all of this water is picking up stormwater from all the way up here at Bemis, and this whole hill is kind of draining down through that pond and down through that stream, and it in fact drains into the Cambridge Reservoir, so it's all a protected watershed. There's the view of the back, looking across the stream. And it's a very nice historic house. This is the ground floor. You can see there's a center hall with 4 nice rooms, and then there are 4 more nice rooms on the second floor. They're really nice spaces. One of the limitations is they're all about the same size. So the programming that we're needing to serve of Council on Aging and Parks and Rec has small spaces, medium spaces, larger spaces. These rooms would be good for some of those uses, but not for many of them. It has a big basement, which is good for storage. And the town has actually looked at paving the existing parking lot that's in the back there. This was a design for a project that was, at the time, earlier this year or last year, just thought to be too expensive. And it has conservation implications and everything. But if you were to do a major building project here and expand, it would have to include a significant parking facility. And Bemis. So Bemis is a wonderful building, but doesn't meet the needs. It's too small, it's not accessible enough. All the things that Carolyn went over. It's very constrained. Bedford Road is right on the front, and the cemetery, historic cemetery, is nearby on the back. It's on a hill. If there were to be an expansion of programming, the only real place to do it would be in that direction, going down the hill, which is, you're in not only in the historic district, but that's the historic mustering ground for the Minutemen on their way to Lexington and Concord. So it's a very precious historic site for the town. There's the cemetery, has these crypts down on the lower level. And if you were to expand down towards the crypts, and you could in fact build an extension of the basement, which is pretty inaccessible now, the basement of the building, and if you could extend the basement out to where you could actually have an accessible, a fully wheelchair accessible entrance on that lower level. And this is one thing you could do, and it's been done in many buildings across New England. This is the public library in the town of Camden, Maine, and they did just that. They built an addition. The roof of the addition is now, if you will, the mustering ground. The roof of the addition is a landscape. That little gazebo is a light, a skylight, a light well, bringing into the lower level space, and this kind of stone wall can match the crypts with a glass entrance. So it is really, we've identified this as an approach if you were determined to stay at Bemis. You'd have to do something like this. However, it doesn't address the parking issue, so it's still a problematic notion. Here's another example of the same thing. This is the Stowe, Massachusetts Library, where again, over on the right, you can see the accessible entrance at the basement level of the library. In this case, they built a two-story addition, which maybe you wouldn't do on Venus. And then Hartwell, you've heard about too. There's the Hartwell building where the school administration is, and then there's the 3 pods that were built in the 50s. And there is a stream. This is a stream here that you drive across and back out. So there's wetlands issues there. There's the A pod, the B pod, the C pod, that's where the LEAP program is. There's the Hartwell building with the school administration and the 2 preschools. And this is the view of the Hartwell building. That's one side of the Hartwell building, the north side. On the left, you see the south side from Lincoln Road. So Lincoln Road is on a pretty steep hill here, but at the south end of Lincoln Road, it's about at the same level as the upper floor of the Hartwell building. But then as you move up along the school site, you get considerably higher. And there's the stream. So this meeting follows a meeting 9 days ago over at the pods with many members of the community. There were about 120 people came, and the models were all there. And as one of the activities, people looked at the models with these blue foam blocks, and actually community members pushed the blocks around and came up with ideas for how you would build a new Council on Aging on this site or a community center on that site. So here's people talking about the commuter lot and talking about, well, if you were to build a Council on Aging, maybe you'd put it nearer to Donovan's and you'd keep some parking behind. And this is at the DPW yard where you tear down the DPW building and put a parking lot, and then you'd put a senior center, a Council on Aging at the end of Lewis Street up front. Again, these are photographs of what Lincoln residents were suggesting. That nothing's been done to advance this idea or another idea on any of these sites. No choices have really been made about how to arrange on any of these hypothetical sites. This is just raw documentation of some of the things that were proposed during the workshop 9 days ago. And then the back half of the site is to be determined. You could put a park there, you could build housing. There's more land than you need for a Council on Aging facility. At Pierce, you could build an addition behind Pierce House that would have an elevator and the big rooms and the offices and the handicapped bathrooms. Or you could, somebody said, why don't you move Pierce House flip it and move it all the way, instead of here, move it all the way out towards the road, build addition behind it, and then you wouldn't have to look at the tent. The tent would be all the way in the back. So that's a suggestion that came from the community. Here's Bemis with that low level of addition that could even have, it would be a landscape on top of it, and even could have a tree coming out from the lower level, shading it and building it into the landscape. And then some various ideas at Hartwell. Here's the ball field, and here's the existing Hartwell building, and this is saying double the size of the parking lot and put a building kind of back in the corner, a little bit up more towards the baseball field and the pool. Or here's a different idea that says, here's the ball field out there, and it says, put a new building that's kind of picks up the A pod, B pod, and C pod, and then you get a big protected play area for all the kids in back, which is sort of where it is now, and maybe build another parking lot over here. So those are the kinds of ideas that were discussed at the workshop.
Thank you. I think that's, we can hold on to that in case people have. Is this on?
Yep.
Okay, and you're excellent. Thank you very much. So you got a sense of what happened at the workshop last week. And as David said, none of these ideas are written in stone. They're people's ideas, and we memorialize them by photographing them so that we can talk about them later in more detail. We didn't bring the blocks for you to play with today, but we have the actual models that you see photographed up here are the ones that are on the tables over there. So if you haven't seen them before, feel free to look at them. So what we're gonna do now is if people have questions about any of this, if you have comments, questions of Dan, Carolyn, David, myself, anyone else on the committee, now's the time to ask that, feel free. We'll be talking obviously more about this at the State of the Town. Carolyn's going around with the microphone, so.
I'm your loveliest.
Well, the community centers that you visited, were they all new built buildings or were they renovated buildings?
It was a combination. Carolyn, why don't you address that? Carolyn's actually seen more of them than even the whole committee has. It was a combination, so.
Yeah, exactly. There were some that were new built, some that were, had new additions built onto existing buildings, and some that were really just, it was a school, and they just used the existing building, which they and everyone else has found to be less than satisfactory. So it was a combination.
I think what was found pretty generally with the community, anything that encompassed a senior center particularly, is that there are certain configurations that work well for that, and sometimes retrofitting an old school just doesn't work because the space is wrong for that. Yeah, I guess you had a question for that.
Yeah, if say Bemis was used.
Why don't you use the microphone so everyone can hear you?
Okay.
Great, thanks.
If Bemis was used, where would additional parking go?
Well, that's the issue.
Yeah.
And, not just David showed you a couple of places where there is an underground Camden Main, and I remember using the bathroom myself in that library when I was up in Camden once, the one that was underground, so I've seen it myself, but it doesn't address the issue of parking, which is the problem in the center here, for sure. And as Carolyn pointed out earlier, that the dangers of having to walk across Bedford Road when people come speeding up and down the hill is not going to go away, even if something were done to Bemis to make it bigger. Yes, Carolyn?
The school side appeals to me to include the conservation because it's.
Can't hear you.
And the school site is particularly good because a lot of the rec department is there. But the pool is there, and I know a lot of the elderly use the pool. So that just seems like it would make more sense to have shared spaces, which includes the pool in the summer. And it's also walkable from Lincoln Woods. Not that all the elderly are there, they're specific. This space just wasn't designed for the current population because it's just too big. I mean, the space is too small, the population is too big. What was the other space? Oh, Pierce House, the Pierce Park. That's an intriguing space too, but again, and it might work for the rec department because it's not that far from the school, so they do schlep across this busy road. But it's an intriguing thought. The space down by the commuter parking lot, we're going to really try to have more, or encourage more public transportation, and including bicycling, and to have that compete with a senior center is not my idea of a great idea, unless you could, there's other spaces nearby. I really want to reserve that for that particular purpose. And then there's the DPW. Well, since I live on the north side of Route 2, and I'm dealing with a lot of issues right now, to have the DPW up there is a disaster. It's already bad enough what's happening to the base and Route 2A. To have that kind of traffic is just not my idea of a good idea. And the DPW space now, I think, has a lot of acreage. I sort of remember something like 75 or something. It was talked about for other housing issues. There's a lot, it's a big space. And while it might be good for, you could even put a senior center on that other space if it's actually that big. But I'm going to work my way around back to this space, and it just seems also ideal. And I never, when you're doing a school committee building projects, well, as I've been here almost 30 years, so I've been here a while. We're in the center of the aquifer for the town, and so it's a real tricky issue to park it. But if, so I'm sensitive to the parking lots, but we've got technology now that make more permeable parking lots, and so that we don't displace the water inappropriately, but also it would the water septic. So I think this space has a lot more possibilities, and the others aren't really, all of them are distant seconds.
When you say the space, you're talking about the school complex,
Yeah,
the Harwell
yeah.
complex. Yes, and I think that as we looked at this and the 5 sites that we're considering, that's the only site that would be large enough and appropriate enough to encompass the Parks and Recreation Department as well as the Council on Aging. The other sites would only be for the Council on Aging.
You're not talking community center.
Right, you're not talking about a community center, you're talking about a senior center. And so, thank you for your very thoughtful comments on that. We've also been talking at the same time with the school building committee and the school committee and working in collaboration with them in discussions that if there were two construction projects done in Lincoln, it may make sense to combine them to save the town money overall. So it's all part of the same discussion. You know, obviously no decisions have been made on anything, but we think it makes a lot of sense to work in collaboration with all the groups in town to do what makes sense for Lincoln, for all of Lincoln, not just some of Lincoln. Yes?
Yes, hi, monetary-wise, of all the
Just
sites,
wait for this.
I think you can hear, but monetary-wise of all the sites, which one is the most economical for the town of Lincoln? Have they decided that? Have they looked at that aspect of it?
When you say economical, it really depends how you define that and what you're going to want to
Well,
have
that's relative. How much would, the cost is very important because the taxpayers of Lincoln are going to be paying for this.
Absolutely.
Number one. Number two, of all the sites, which one has the feasibility of costing the Lincoln taxpayers the least amount of money? Have you taken that into consideration?
We're costing things out now, and by the time we get to State of the Town, we'll have some numbers for you. I don't have them for you today, but it also depends on whether the town wants to just do a senior center, whether they want to do a community center, or whether they want to do nothing at all. And and also we're looking at it obviously in terms of what it would cost the town if there were a school building project alone, what it would cost if there were a combined project.
Another thing, are we competing with the school committee?
I hope not.
No,
We're not.
I hope not, but
We're not thinking of this as a competition. We're thinking of this as an opportunity for the town to look at both projects and decide what it wants to do, and maybe do it in the most economical way possible.
You said that very nicely.
Yeah, thanks. There's another comment back here. Question or comment?
Up here too.
Okay, thanks.
While the committee may not have done some costing out, a number of years ago when I was a selectman, we were looking at opportunities for the DPW barn site, because obviously that's very attractive land when we're looking for increasing housing density in South Lincoln or doing anything in South Lincoln. So that spot was looked at, and I was in conversation with other towns that had built DPWs. Now, some of them were sort of Taj Mahal DPWs, but what I learned in the process was it's not just finding an alternative site for DPW, it's that our current barn, as I understood it, was grandfathered, so we did not have to meet a lot of code, environmental code, and that one of the big cost drivers for the barn, wherever we relocated our DPW, would be a lot of this code. And we were talking in the magnitude of, and Tim can probably catch me on this, some of the other towns had spent 30 million and up. So even if we look at a much lower figure, we're probably talking for that site, just to relocate the barn, apart from rehabbing the site, a good $10 million before we built another place. So these are complex financial considerations. So the sooner we can get money. Last night, the school brought forward visions and strategic plans to add to some of the crossing out and looking at the various models for going forward there. It was a wonderful evening for you those of you that missed it, I believe it's on camera, is it not, Jennifer? And the superintendent's webpage, she has a page on the website which has a lot of information about the strategic plan. I highly recommend it's a parenthetic comment, but that's a shout out from me. But they started attaching dollars to things, and the sooner we can attach dollars and understand some of these sites, it's hard, you get excited about one, perhaps the DPW barn, say, oh, we'll just move the barn, but then kind of poke around and go, ouch. So I'm with, I think it was Jane, back to the Hartwell site, kind of the metaphor that, as you know, I've preached about it for years, of a community campus, but also the co-location of a lot of things for potential cost savings going forward in terms of operating costs is very appealing to me. Thank you.
Thanks. Another question's right here, I think.
Oh, yeah, I believe one time the Farrington Memorial was mentioned as a possible site.
Yeah.
Could we put the DPW there?
Nobody wants the DPW there to do that. The Farrington Memorial was thought of as a site originally, was one of the ones looked at, and it was really decided that it was too out of the way for everyone and difficult to access.
Route 2.
So, yeah, Route 2 is right there. And so we're looking at it, we were looking at the 5 sites that we were tasked to look at are ones that could be considered for a community center or a senior center, not necessarily for the DPW. Obviously, if the town decides it wants to move the DPW, that's part of the discussion.
Right here. Tashioglu.
Yes.
Right here.
If anyone else, any other members of the committee want to come up here with me and answer any of these questions, you're obviously free to do that. Keelan?
Once the procedure come to a decision and a conclusion.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to be doing is we're taking all of the information, and there's a survey also that we haven't mentioned today. Those of you who were some of you I know were at the workshop last week, and we filled out a survey then. You can also fill it out online if you prefer. But we have copies at the back of the room here, and would like you to take it with you or fill it out today and tell us what you think. What we're doing is we're compiling all the information that we get from the residents in Lincoln about what they would prefer in light of all these discussions. And we're going to present that information to the town at the State of the Town meeting on Saturday, November 15th. The selectmen are then going to take away what they learn about town residents' views on a community center or senior center and decide whether they want to present a warrant article to the annual town meeting in March. So we're still in discussion right now, but what happens at the State of the Town meeting and in the surveys and so forth are very important to informing the town officials how to proceed at the annual town meeting. And at the State of the Town meeting, there's also going to be discussion about the school building project. The first hour or so is the community center, the second hour or so is the school building project, and then people can ask questions at the State of the Town meeting about either of those projects and whether they work, whether in conjunction or separately, and obviously what comes out of that discussion will inform the town meeting.
So you haven't designed a full procedure yet, because you don't really know what you're going to have to be able to decide. So it's, I would think, not likely that you would put a warrant article for the whole thing by March.
It could happen. We don't know. And the other thing is that
you're going to do that.
right. The two sort of top choices that come out of the State of the Town meeting, David and his firm are then going to do going to drop a bit of a schematic on that, and we can cost out what that would look like so that the town will be better informed on cost. I mean, obviously, the finances are very, very important on this, and Lincoln is always very aware of what things cost and cares a lot about that, and so that's part of, depending on what the town decides it wants, we'll then be able to present more accurate financial figures.
So it's likely either that you would put up 5 choices, or you would have narrowed it down.
We won't put,
or you would just have one, right?
Yeah, well, that's up to the selectmen, it's not up to the committee.
It's unlikely.
No, it's unlikely that there will be 5 choices for the town, it would be narrowed, we narrowed considerably. But ultimately, it's the decision of the Board of Selectmen. We're a subcommittee of the Selectmen, and so we will be making recommendations to the Selectmen, the Community Center Study Committee, but the Board of Selectmen itself will make that ultimate decision. Tim, you had something you wanted to add to that?
Thanks, Penny. Tim Higgins, Town Administrator, and I just wanted to give you folks a little additional perspective on the financial planning that the town has been doing around these capital projects and others. Sarah will correct me on the timing if my memory is failing me, but about 10 years ago, the Board of Selectmen, working with the Capital Planning Committee and Finance Committee, recognized that the town was going to be confronting some big capital expenditures for facilities, town offices. It was clear needed to be renovated. The schools had their study ongoing. We knew about the challenges with the senior center, and in the back of everyone's mind, there's some conservation purchases at some point that the town hopes to be able to have the opportunity to execute. So with all of that in mind, the financial committees in town started to think and plan. And I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that we've set those considerations aside. What the Board of Selectmen has tried to do is focus the early conversation on creative thinking about opportunities. We have intentionally decided not to lead with financial considerations because we don't want that to stifle the creative thinking. But we don't want you to think, or be left with the impression that the impact on the town, on the taxpayers and all of that are questions that we've ignored. And as a matter of fact, the Finance Committee and the financial boards came to town meeting over the past several years, recommended that the money be put aside in a capital stabilization fund. The balance in that fund at the end of the next year will be about $3 million. In addition, we have reserves in the Community Preservation Fund, and those could potentially be brought to bear to support the recreational aspects of this. And we also are in a situation, a fortunate situation, where a lot of the existing debt is going to be retired over the next several years. So I don't offer this as an editorial comment about the affordability question, but I want the residents to understand that the people that you have on your financial committees are thinking about these things and modeling different impacts. So once this work is done and we have a sense of what the cost ranges are, and Jennifer and the school committee have completed their work and we know what they're thinking, we're going to start to try to put together a plan that makes sense for the town.
Ultimately, whatever's proposed in March, we ought to be able to tell you what pretty good sense of what the impact would be on your property tax bill. Yes. Actually, why don't we get some?
No.
This is just a comment on one of the sites. Behind the commuter parking lot is about a 2 or so acre area that's used very occasionally by Lincoln Woods for a basketball court and stuff like that. It's barely used. And acquiring that for additional space if necessary, or not to impinge more on the new parking lot, is a possibility, especially since if people are talking about developing, putting in more housing or businesses or whatever in South Lincoln, needing a sewage treatment plant in the area is important. And Lincoln Woods has a site for actually a NIMBY-free site behind that would, in using modern technology, could supply all of South Lincoln in that site without affecting any other area in town that would obviously bring NIMBY fighting.
Thank you.
I don't think that we should believe that we're going to save money by having two construction construction projects going on at the same time, which would save money. The school is much farther advanced than this, it seems to me, unless, well, I don't think unless anything. I mean, the school is just, they've been working on that project for quite a while. This is new. And the only thing that you might save is when you're doing the school, the contractor will know that certain utilities do not end there. And that somewhere off-site, there's going to be some more things happening. But I don't think those two projects are going to happen at the same time.
Another comment here?
I'm not.
I don't like to disagree with Diana. I sort of disagree with it. I mentioned Route 2. Now, not only do I cross this corner, but now I got the 128 bridge, and I talked to some of us, other side and north side, and we agreed that we would rather have it all done now and get it over with than have it sequential. Although it's going to be sequential on 128 anyway, that's another story. But that's what, the other thing is, the schools are going to have to move, they're going to be new rooms, they're going to do substantial rework. Sorry about that. And they're going to move kids around. And, you know, in a way, Diana's right, well, move them over to the rec department or something, and they'll bring down the council on aging. But I sort of see it, if everybody could handle it, this major staging, and everybody just moving around for a few years and get it all done and over with, rather than having this long-term construction, especially if that is determined to be the site. Those are just two opinions.
Thank you. On that subject too, one of the issues that's come up is if a new building were to be built at the Hartwell site and the town decided it wanted to do it in conjunction with the school building project, that building could be used for the kids temporarily while the school was being renovated, so that it wouldn't have to rent these multi-million dollars spent on trailers temporarily that then we give back at the end. So that's one of the things under consideration.
I have a question, and that has to do with finance, but it's not direct. And I asked it last night at the school program, and there was a finance committee member at my table, but that individual did not know the answer to this. That is that I think it's very important that we understand, and I speak as a member of the senior community, that we understand what opportunities are available to seniors to assist them with regard to offsetting the impact on their tax bills so that we can afford to invest in the town that will in fact may raise our real estate value. So the question I asked last night was, what about the senior tax deferral program? What is it exactly? What does it offer? And is there a cap on it? And how do people access it? I think that it's important that we have that material available, because then in looking at the impact on your tax bill, it could be with or without the application of the senior tax relief program, if that's still in place. Tim, is it? Is it still an active program? And people were very unaware of it at my table, so I think we need to get out there and talk about that a little bit more, what it really is, what it has to offer, and the implications for us as a senior community so we can afford to make investments. And this may be a way of allowing us to do that.
Thank you, Sarah. One thing also that I think Tim mentioned that I make sure everyone picked up on too is that if it were a combined facility with the recreation department, if the town decided it wanted a true community center, that community preservation funds could be available because they're available for recreation but not for seniors.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure you worded that right, but you know what I'm talking about. There's another question.
I have two little questions. Would LEAP be able to remain at the school campus if they built a community center?
LEAP is one of the stakeholders in the Hartwell complex, and we've certainly included them in the discussions. I think there's a sense in town that LEAP is an integral part of that campus because a lot of Lincoln kids use it, families use it after school. And so that would be definitely one of the ones that would stay. We would have to build something that would accommodate that.
Okay, and my other question.
I don't say definitely as if the town decides, but that's certainly in our wheelhouse.
The other thing I'd like to know is that if we built a community center someplace other than at Bemis Hall, what would we be using Bemis Hall for?
Bemis Hall would definitely be repurposed, as the popular word is now. It wouldn't be going to waste. We'd be using Bemis for other things. There's been some interest in one of the school that is using the rent space from the First Parish Hall across the street, expanding their school here. We might have other Lincoln groups that would be using it. I mean, it would definitely be part of the consideration. We would not let Bemis go to waste. We've done renovations on Bemis recently. We've added the elevator and so forth. So, no, we would continue to use it.
The library is interested in expanding programs.
Yeah. I mean,
And the book sale is very much in need of improved space.
yeah, thank you, Dilla. I mean, we would definitely be working on that issue, sure. We're very practical in Lincoln, as you know. Yeah, other questions, comments? Anything? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming, and we hope to see everyone on November 15th. As I said, if you haven't filled out a survey yet, please do that, or you can also do it online. Thanks a lot.